Welcome to Sikuro Conversations, the podcast where we unpack how to do business in Africa smartly, safely, and sustainably. My name is Sheila Kamande from Sikuro Group Africa. At Sikuro Group Africa, we help organizations navigate risk, protect their people, and build resilience in Africa. We believe that security and intelligence aren't just about protection. They're about enabling growth, and that's exactly what these conversations are about. Today, I'm thrilled to have Mercy Ndegwa, the Public Policy Director, East and Horn of Africa at Meta. Mercy has been at the heart of some of the most important conversations shaping Africa's digital economy. We'll be talking about how technology is transforming businesses across Africa. Thank you very much for coming. And karibu sana.
Asante sana.
So to start us off, maybe you can tell us about your professional journey and how you got into the public policy and how has it been for you? Yeah.
So first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is exciting to be here, talking about what I hope will be useful conversations to others who probably will draw some inspiration. That is what I'd hope this conversation would do for those who would listen to it.
Yeah.
And to share a little bit maybe about the career and what this looks like. So a little bit about the journey. It's been, I started off first of all, trained as a teacher. So let's start there.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So this is like a total departure from where I started, yet not quite a departure, and I'll tell you how.
Yeah.
So I trained as a teacher, but also went on to study accounting, economics, at the university, and also did some accounting courses outside of the university at Strathmore back in the day. Those are many years back. And I got drawn a lot towards the area of accounting, which was more from my father nudging me towards that direction. So I really wanted to follow in his footsteps. He'd been an accounting person within the army, which is where he used to serve.
Yeah.
And so for me, accounting was what I was going to be. And I actually did end up into accounting. So I was working in an accounts office in my first job. And I thought it was enjoyable and fun because I love numbers. I was enjoying the cycle of, figuring out what numbers were saying about the company and how it was doing.
Yeah.
But I realized very quickly that I was not a routine person. I don't like those, the structure of accounting is such that you are constantly repeating the cycles over and over. You have mid-month cycle, then end-month cycles, and it's constantly about doing the books of accounts. And for me, that was not quite it. I was initially enjoying it, but then I realized quickly that I wasn't anymore.
Yeah.
And so I started to think about what that could look like in terms of pivoting towards something that I enjoyed. And one of the things that I tapped into quite early on is that I loved talking to people.
Yeah.
So I needed a role or a profession that would allow me to be in a space where I engage with people one-on-one, where I can be influential in shaping how thoughts are evolving and how ideas could actually be realized in terms of outcomes that are desired and so on and so forth. So when I left that company that I originally worked for, I went into a sort of like a finance function, but then it allowed for me to do project work. So I was doing a lot of management of projects where I would sit as the, interface between the organization and the different vendors that we had for systems that we were putting in place, speaking from a finance perspective, but representing the finance team in terms of how do we translate the needs for the finance team within the systems and projects that we're implementing in the company. I found that to be very interesting and engaging. I loved it. It was, thankfully for me, from my first employment to this other one, the companies that I was working for at the time were in the digital space. And so I was lucky to have a front seat to seeing the evolution of technology. At the time, in my first organization, we were selling dial-ups. It was a small ISP that was doing very well for its time, selling dial-ups, leased lines, and basically internet connectivity to homes and offices, but in a very small scale. Yeah. I moved to an organization that was doing this a little bigger, and I was starting to see the nexus between technology and powering up everything literally within an economy or the world, literally. And I started to get drawn more and more into how can I lean into that space with the strengths that I had, the background that I had, but more true to the things that I would enjoy more in terms of the work. And thankfully, in that company, this is Safaricom at the time, I discovered that we needed to mirror the structure that we had in the group at the time. We were reporting into the UK, and that structure required for the team to have an international, let me say, international affairs team.
Yeah.
We didn't have one at Safaricom at the time, and so as the opportunity came up for us to recruit for it, and good enough for me, or lucky enough for me, I had taken a course in international business management at University of Nairobi at a master's level, and I was offered the opportunity. But as soon as I moved into the role, unfortunately, there was another reorg and restructuring that now shaped that part of the work into a public policy function.
Yeah.
And that is how I found myself in the world of public policy, if I put it that way.
Yeah.
Thankfully, public policy is let me say, it's a big pillar or topic within economics, which is one of the areas that I had studied. So it wasn't unfamiliar. The fact that I had a financial background as well helped, because then I was bringing the uniqueness of having an understanding of numbers, what that meant, and then applying that in terms of policies. Like, what does this mean in terms of companies' compliance to a policy maybe that is coming from government? Because public policy is a government mandate.
Yeah.
And so looking at how can we, as a company, being a private sector company at the time, how do we ensure that we are in compliance? How do we ensure that we are able to translate this into systems and processes, these things that the government is asking us to comply with? How do we do that internally? What does that look like for our numbers and so on? Because, primarily these organizations were all for profit. And so I found myself in a little corner that was very critical in that conversation. A lot of the other people that I was working with within the public policy team had legal background. So I've worked very closely with lawyers over the time, but also a myriad of many other, let me say, disciplinaries that have become very critical in understanding public policy. Because like I said, public policy is a mandate of government, but public policy can touch on very many aspects. It can be on health, on education, on technology, on different things. Yeah. And so just having people that have an understanding across all of those is really critical. And so that's how I found myself in it. And it has been a joy, because I have not been in a career where every single day is new and different, because you have government coming up with new policies or wanting help in different ways from private sector, and willing into all of those spaces. But in addition to that, being specifically a tech policy person means I'm also at the forefront of understanding how technology can power up different sectors, and the relevance of technology across all of those, and how then do we support as policy advisors in shaping that to the benefit of the public. So I'm eternally grateful for this opportunity.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a unique journey.
Absolutely.
That is very, very unique. And especially now that you moved from there into the intersection of policy and tech.
Yeah.
Tell us how that has taken shape and how that looks like across Africa.
So you'll be surprised with technology, it's pretty much the same across the globe, in the sense that technology is an enabler and a lever that helps everything else get powered up and be more efficient, be able to scale higher and farther than humans could by themselves. And so it's just very empowering to have technology as a lever for any sector. And so I think the priority across the world, when you think about policies that are tech related, to the question you're asking, everywhere in the corner of this world is about how do we ensure, and this was like the conversation in the beginning and continues to be, how do we make sure that we are getting as many people as possible connected to the internet to start with, because without having connectivity as a fundamental thing, that you can't really say you are leveraging technology. Yeah. So technology in terms of the information, communications, and the technology, ICTs as we know them, are a very big factor of their success is having the connectivity in place, which is a huge undertaking. That one requires governments themselves to commit money, funds to ensuring that you have, for example, the infrastructure in place, whether it's fiber or spectrum available that is dedicated to the right uses, and all these things that government only can do. But then requires also to have the private sector to come and support by investing specifically into the sector in terms of, for example, if it's a mobile network, for instance, being able to invest and grow its network to reach people who are everywhere in the country, not just in the cities, which is what most entities tend to do. and making sure that that is the case so that we have as many people as connected as possible. So the priorities have come from wanting to have more people on the grid, connected, and then not just being connected, but once you are connected, do you know what to do with the connectivity? Do you know what to do with the internet? How do we make you aware or get the skills you need to be able to do that the right way? And how do we support that? That is done primarily by private sector in partnership with government, but also then literally multiple stakeholders. Academia will try to solve for that by training these skills in schools. Civil society will try to leverage that in scaling maybe advocacy around issues of interest, social issues, or otherwise, and so on and so forth. So it brings together everyone. So across the world, those become sort of like the main areas of interest when it comes to technology.
Yeah. Given this entire journey that you have taken, coming from the very beginning of our digitization in Africa, what would you say is what's your perspective on the biggest shifts that have happened over time from, I don't know, maybe early 2000s to now, and maybe how does the future look like? And are the different regions in Africa different in how they take up the ease with which they take up digital transformation?
That's a great question. So first of all, that I just feel like I'll sound super cake that I have the history, the entire history of digital from early 2000s, and sometimes I'm like, early 2000s, she already was like you say, I was working. I was just actually done in uni when I joined the digital space. So it was like literally at the cusp of digital taking off in the country and in the continent.
Yeah.
And we are fortunate to be in a country where we are miles ahead of a lot of countries. But in different ways. There is just a lot of, the digital space is very diverse. So there is lots of things in there that you could say Kenya in many ways is ahead, but there's also aspects that other countries are. But yeah, so I'd say the major shifts, I think there's tons, but basic ones are that we have a lot more people connected to the internet.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there was very few people who were connected. In fact, the internet was such a foreign concept in itself. There wasn't a lot of people who understood what exactly you were talking about when you said the internet, the World Wide Web. We had like terms that felt like they were super foreign, that they were not for us, or other people who were maybe meant for them. And so there was a lot of shift in even just socially, people understanding what this was and how this was integral into their day-to-day lives, which now I feel like is very synonymous with life. A lot of things you will not be able to navigate very well if you're not in sync with the internet, especially now where we literally have that in our hands, like a device, because we previously had that. It's something we'd access maybe in school on a computer in the initial days. So the bigger shift, I think, is just people being connected to the internet and what has that portends in terms of culturally, how that has shifted awareness, access to information, and what that means for people, because you are not the same person after you know things that you know. Like if something is relevant, it'll shift how you operate going forward. You will maybe do better in your business because now you know more than you did before. It will enlighten you in terms of how you engage with other people. So we've shifted as a people, but also in terms of just the investment into the continent by the governments in the continent, but also by, let me say, foreign direct investment into this space has been huge, because there's a lot of other countries outside of, in the West and in the East that have much more advancement than this continent has had in terms of technology. And so lots of investments that we've seen coming into the country. What has that meant for us? It has meant, besides connecting business people, it means also businesses now have connectivity, and therefore they're able to do more than they were able to do before. So for instance, maybe early 2000s, a lot of what you would have seen was shops, spaces like this being taken up where people have what we call brick and mortar setups, like this one, where you have an office space that is physical, people come to and they sit. But right now we have a lot, I'd say millions of businesses that are run purely online. They have no office space and they're running. It was a concept that didn't feel, realistic then. But with time, with technology, this is something that is possible and is happening today. So I think that's also one of the shifts, that there's more of online activity, even by businesses, in the way we do business, in the way people interact with one another than was the case before. If I was to glean into some of the examples of companies I've worked for also, look at technology. I remember in Safaricom, I think it was around 2000, where we celebrated in a big party.
Yeah.
I think it was 1 million. We had hit 1 million customers at that time. It was a big deal, a very big deal.
Yeah.
And now this is a company that is talking tens of millions of customers.
Yeah.
I mean, there's many people in this country with connectivity from a mobile phone from the company. So what you're seeing more is people with a mobile device, and that has definitely shifted how we are as a people.
Yeah.
So the mobile technology in this last 25 years has become a really integral part of who we are, and is a big shift. I think the other thing that has definitely shifted is, I'd say, the scale with which people can do things. And when I say people, I mean including businesses, including the governments and so on. So if you think about it, today, because of that ease of access to information through technology, you can connect with family members who are abroad. Previously, if somebody went to the US as a family member, you waited until they came to visit, or that phone call over, they buy a calling card, call you, and you had to wait a long time before you heard from them again.
Yeah.
Now you can FaceTime them as though they were right there in the room with you. They can be part of celebrations with you because of technology.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ease with which, like, the globe literally has just become very interoperable and has become almost like, we say it's a global village because of digital. And so that is like, I'm talking about basic examples of how the connectedness of people, for instance, as an example of how that has shifted, is even more now. You find that people being away doesn't necessarily feel distant because you can connect. Of course, for businesses, what that looks like is the scale to which now businesses can thrive.
Yeah.
You have an organization here that is outstanding in the work that it does in security. It makes it very easy for you, because of technology, to be able to do that at scale while you're based in Nairobi, serving other countries as you're able to do today, and working with, within the group wider than that, globally.
Yeah.
That is because of technology, and I would attribute that specific to technology to say that it becomes so much easier for businesses to scale their reach to beyond the brick and mortar, like I was saying earlier, to be able to say, I am in Kenya, but I'm operating my business in Kigali, I'm doing this in Lagos, I'm doing this in Cote d'Ivoire and other places. So it's easy to do business, to scale, to be seen by customers who you previously had no way of reaching, by users who might need your product or your services that you previously couldn't reach with ease because of the technology. So a lot of shifts, I'd say, are very tangible. You can see them, you can feel them, and you see them.
Yeah.
And they have been largely good for, I'd say, the global economy. Where I think the shifts may have been challenges is that with technology, the same way we're having ease in business and all these things, is also the same way with which now proliferation of things that may not necessarily be good also is creeping in as fast. Because if someone is a bad actor on the same internet, they can target you while you're sitting in Kenya, and they could be in Russia, that kind of thing, or they could be elsewhere. And so you have, not to single out Russia, they could be anywhere in the world, is the point I'm making. So I think there's a lot of ease with which also bad actors could, leverage the same technology to do their bad acts. And so it's, I think, a question of how quickly and how well are we serving in making sure that we amplify the good, and also be quick to learn how to reduce the bad, or mitigate those risks that come from bad actors being online.
And what does that look for you, especially because you're in policy, and this obviously, and it's important that you have actually brought that point. How does that look like for policy and the risk that comes with that shift and the expansion of technology? And now with your background of policy, and what does that look for you? Mm-hmm. How does that make you and other execs look at policy within the space of risk?
Like I said, I think it's so this is the part we are playing as policy advisors. We are looking at what role would policy have in shaping that space. And when I say the space, I mean the digital ecosystem or environment, to harness more good and mitigate the risks that can come from bad actions. And so constantly our minds are across the different policies that could be relevant in that space. So we're thinking about things like, can we ensure that we have more people, for example, connected to the internet? Because we know that the more people you bring online, they can draw all of these gains and benefits we've been talking about.
Yeah.
They are better off in terms of business, in social connectedness. They're better off in improving their efficiencies in their businesses, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, so the focus there from a policy perspective is do we have connectivity? And what are the barriers that are stopping connectivity from being achieved to the levels that we would like to have everybody, or that we're leaving no one behind is what we say in the industry more regularly. How do we make sure we leave no one behind? By making sure that we're connecting everyone.
Yeah.
So the policies there would be around increasing foreign direct injection of investments by lowering the barriers that have to do with what is stopping people from investing in our region, for instance. Is it maybe there's too high taxation? Is it too many duties and fees and things that block entities from wanting to come into a region because it then beats the purpose, or it doesn't make the investment viable? How do we negotiate with governments around lowering some of those barriers to attract that investment? And governments are proactively already doing some of these things themselves. And we just support with areas that we think specifically they could lean into. It is connections in terms of can we lobby for the right spectrum policies, for example, to say what spectrum is committed to what uses, because those things are important. When you think about the internet, it works because you have spectrum, which is this thing, like, let me say it's like an amorphous thing, for lack of a better term, that connects, that allows for the wireless connection between one person to the next. And that is a big mandate of the government to make sure that that is assigned to the right purposes, whether it is national security. You have specific bands dedicated to security uses. There's bands that are dedicated to mobile use. There's bands dedicated to satellite use, and so on and so forth. How do you make sure that the spectrum policies make sense and allow for as many people as possible to come to get connected, for example? You also have connectivity from the perspective of devices, for example. So it's one thing to have all of the things right. You have internet coming to say on the location where people are, but then is the device affordable? So there's policies around affordability of devices. How do you make sure that, again, you lower barriers for manufacturers of devices to be able to bring affordable devices into the continent? And to not only have that, but also how do we make sure that those devices also can serve local users? So for instance, a lot of manufacturers of devices will manufacture them with default languages being, for example, languages in the West, but primarily say English. If somebody is in the village, can they be able to speak, use their device and navigate through settings, for instance, without the challenge of language as a barrier? So how do you lower, again, those barriers of how to make it easy for these devices to be adopted by people and be used so that they're useful to them to use? So, and when I say devices, it's not just mobile. Mobile is primarily the main device in our continent that is used for people to connect to the internet, and it makes sense. But there's laptops, there is iPads, there is, tablets, not iPads. iPads are one of the models. So tablets, laptops, computers for schools, and so on and so forth. How do we lower the barriers for all of those things? Because they are the monitors that help you to connect to, devices that help you to connect to the internet. So all of those are discussions within the ICT and policy space. So that's one side, dealing with the supply side in terms of the readiness for people to actually be able to take up this. So you have connectivity, but you also have devices. And then now you come to the other spectrum of local languages. Are you able to understand the content that you're coming across in the devices, for instance? If you're navigating apps like maybe a health app that is on the phone, is it maybe in English? Is it in a foreign language that you don't understand? Is it there where we can incorporate local languages that you're familiar with, whether it's Igbo or it's Swahili or it's Hausa, it's Sutu, and all those things? How do you make sure that these devices can also be able to be used by people who are in the continent? And so that's a big chunk of the policy work that we also are involved in as policy people within the tech space. But over and above that, it's also how can we impart the skills that people need to be able to create those apps that are relevant for the environment in which they are. So you identify what issues you have in the community in terms of problems you want to solve for, and you say, I could develop an app. For example, yourselves as security, you could say, we want to develop an app for maybe giving security updates, as an example, to people, so that as they're moving around, they know in this area this might be a challenge, or this is what we're seeing in this and the other area. But then how do they interact with your app more would come from how well they can adapt or relate to your app. And that usually is where now factors that are about your local relevance of your app are important. And so it's basically how do you stir up that interest for people to build solutions that are local and relevant to local issues. And it comes from giving them the right skills. It comes from creating the right environment for innovation so that people who are interested, say, to be developers, to learn things that would help them to unlock that space, can be able to get access to those things. They can find that maybe in curriculum in terms of education. It's giving them skills they need that are relevant for today. So it's not going into a university and learning stuff to do with mainframe computers from years back. It is going into that university and finding that the things you're learning are relevant to the technology of today. So keeping in touch. So there's a lot of policies that are around making sure that the adoption of this space is easy for people. So those are sort of like the spectrum. But also in that side is also now the question of safety and security, which is, I think, a big thing. And it's a really, I'd say, front and center also of a lot of the conversations. Like, how do we make sure that people are able to navigate this internet world safely and without feeling like it is now causing them harm in their offline world, you know, where because of being online now you're being hurt offline, or you're being targeted, or you're being minimized or demeaned and, you know, hurt online such that you're even afraid to operate offline. And so it's just making sure that you create environments that are addressing those issues, but also security challenges in terms of where you have bad users who may present cybersecurity threats and so on, that also need to find a way to curtail those. So all of these are the like wide spectrum of all of the policy work. So it's very diverse, and that's why I was saying it's a really interesting space, because every day you're dealing with different things. Today could be security issues, and it's constant, but it could change. You know, security issues back in the day, if I was to give an example, was, you know, and it's still, I'd say, relevant. It's concerns around if infrastructure has been put in place. We don't want to have, for example, vandalism. You know, like how you have people attacking power transformers and taking fuel. We have the same challenge when it comes to physical infrastructure that's been put in place for, you have the cable cuts, you've heard about fiber cuts. All these things are vandalism, and that needs to be protected, because if you then if you don't take care of that, it means then people get disconnected even though the connections or connectivity had already been provided. So making sure that you're addressing those kinds was sort of like where the focus primarily was previously. It still is, because obviously we still want the infrastructure to be intact. But now we're advancing. You find that previously people were concerned about, I'd say, things like, but then now you have the evolution of security concerns to deep fakes and things that we previously, 2 years, 3 years ago, we're not talking deep fakes. The use of AI to fool people in terms of altering videos, presenting content that is not necessarily, those kinds of things are new. And so the security challenges keep evolving as well, as is the case with technology all through. So as you're getting new features, new good benefits and I'd say lovely things that you see technology bringing forth, we also are seeing an increase in the challenges too. And so it's taking all of those in stride and striking the balance every day in terms of addressing both.
When you talk of business continuity and as the backbone of responsible operations, how do you see the concept of responsible organizational responsibility evolving for companies in Africa today?
That's a tough question at the same time, because I can't say I would speak for all companies, but I can give indicative insights based on the experience I have in the sector and what I see companies already trending towards. And I'd say that a lot of companies in their I don't say attempt, but in their
efforts.
As they're trying in their efforts to be more responsible corporates, is that the focus is not just on profits that they need to make, or on the bottom line, whatever that is for the organization. Some of them are non-profits and so on, but they have the interest that they're advancing. Many companies are stepping outside of just having that one focus, which ideally, typically, a company would worry only about its bottom line. But companies are becoming more responsive to asking themselves, how else can they lean into the world, pretty much, in terms of what more can we do? So within their own sphere, you'll find companies saying, before profits, can we also think about how we can be a responsible organization, maybe in being responsible in how we contribute towards, for example, green energy efforts, for instance, as an example. How do we lean in as an organization to focus on maybe making our product not just drive numbers towards the product in terms of people who can use it and for us to make money, but also how can we make sure that that product is safe to use? How can we make sure that product is maybe giving more insights or information for the person to do more beyond that product, you know? So let me maybe break it down more responsibly. In the case of Meta, for instance, we have social media platforms, which is you know, your Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, that are technology that has been built by the company to allow the social connectedness of people and to advance that as much as possible. The intention is for these platforms to be good and to be used for good for people. Yes. But we know that that could also, you know, be challenged in certain ways. And so the company steps outside of not just offering those platforms, but making sure that the platforms are also providing additional insights. So you'll find the company itself will make huge investments in drawing insights from experts in different areas. For instance, if we see patterns or trends around safety as a concern, we will work very closely with safety organizations to really get to the bottom of how can we support more safety efforts and maybe education and awareness for our users within the platform itself. It is something that the company steps voluntarily to enable. Yeah. I remember with Safaricom, for example, there was a lot of work that the company would do through its foundations to give back to the community. So you'd find a lot of efforts going into, you know, we are this big organization, we are making money through our mainstream business, but how can we make sure that some of that profit is repatriated back into advancing healthcare education efforts, you know, in terms of schools and places, but also, you know, enabling different social impacting activities. So, for instance, information for farmers, apps to help people do investments. You know, we have things like Makiba, you know, Mtiba that is helping things to do with, you know, the different apps like those things that are meant to give back in a sense. So there is already, I think, a lot of effort by organizations to do that, and those can vary depending. So it depends with what aligns with already what your core mission is and how you see yourselves, you know, being maybe more influential or impacting the community more or in a social way. But besides that, I think it's also the question of how can you also lean into spaces that allow for you to work closely with government. You know, governments have a lot of power is not the word. Governments have a lot of reach. The mandate of government is to support the public. Yeah. So you can imagine when you think about governments coming together in a regional bloc, for example, as East Africa Community or African Union or, you know, ECOWAS and so on, they are now speaking on behalf of many citizens of many countries coming together. Yeah. And when you think about that, the power of those governments or that entity that is representing those governments is huge. But the way to scale, to support and scale reach to all of those citizens, if a company is looking to be more socially responsible corporate, is to partner with also those institutions of governance that are there across regions to see how can we advance maybe those things I was talking about, safety, security efforts, outside of the profit goal that they might have. And so I find that when companies do that, and many of the companies that do that well, still actually end up raking in the numbers, because then people get endeared to the brand. Yeah. They feel like these companies care for us more than, you know, beyond the just making money off of us with the primary product that they're trying to push to us. So there is that thing, I think, to motivate more corporates. So I'd say it varies and it depends with the space that the entity is in, but there's definitely opportunities for all of us. And so just corporates, it's also individuals. Yeah. Whether you're a small, you know, sole proprietor or you're a small scale business, MSME and so on, there is always opportunity to lean and give back in a sense. You know, I think it's a big part of I'd say efforts to make the world a better place. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you see an appetite for intelligence-driven decision making in organizations, especially from where you sit?
I absolutely think that is actually where we are in the world, and I feel like that is becoming more and more the thing that most organizations need. And I mean, think about it. My perspective is that an organization wants to do well. Otherwise, you know, you've set up to do something, to achieve a goal. Yes. And if you can be able to have almost precision in terms of how do I get to this goal quickly, get to it well, probably even surpass the goal, data is at the heart of that, in my view. And when I think about how technology especially is making that easy, Now we're in the space of artificial intelligence as a thing, and that is like an amazing space to be.
Yeah.
And that I think every single organization that is run out there needs to find a way to embed artificial intelligence into how it operates, because that allows for you to have what you're talking about, insights from data that you have every day. Because you already collect a lot of information as an organization. If you think about it, you already have information about your customer, you have information about what is it they do or they like to purchase the most from you, services that they take from you, and so on and so forth, information that they've provided you to be able to enjoy your service or your product. And artificial intelligence is basically making all of that data make sense in terms of, I can be able to tell by looking, for example, if I'm a supermarket or, I'm in the retail distribution space, I can say from looking at my information, there's more people picking up maybe groceries in this particular branch than is the case in the other branch, where I'm seeing people picking up maybe more of laundry items, for instance. And then you have now data that is not making sense to you, and you're wondering, what makes them want to pick this item here and more of this? Or maybe what makes them pick this item here most mornings, and this is consistently being picked all, and then you have grocery there, but it's not moving. So data makes all of this now clear. It's like a picture in front of you where you're starting to, artificial intelligence helps you now to make sense of this data and to start to understand it's probably the location of your grocery store here that is making access very easy. It could be the supplies of the things that you have in this grocery that are, maybe it's fresher, it's whatnot. And you can start to see the differences, that if all of these factors are the same across all, you're able to start to say, is it the peak times? Is it the timings that are making this favorable? Is it the location of this particular store? It could be that you have this store along the way of people going home or going to work or whatever, and they find it easy to access you vis-a-vis the other, and so on and so forth. So data is usually there. It's the making sense of that data itself is where now artificial intelligence comes in, because it helps you now to have that clear picture and to see very clear trends or narratives of what you need to shift around in terms of levers to increase your results towards the outcomes you desire. So I would say that is one thing. But I think even just being able to know, for instance, what challenges you might have along the way. If it was intelligence from the perspective of, because intelligence is very broad. It can be anything, literally. If it is intelligence in terms of telling me where the blockers might be, then it helps me to prepare for those blockers in terms of how do I jump those hoops or how do I circumvent them, and so on and so forth. So I think there is, intelligence is at the heart of everything. It is critical. So I would say yes, absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Do you think then, going by what you've said, are we leveraging intelligence or data in the right way, or are we still growing as a continent in that area? Like, is there some space for growth? How far are we from where the globe is?
That's a good one. I think we are growing. If you reflect on the conversation that we were having earlier in terms of where we've come from the 2000s, as you were asking, connectivity has really grown. People now have more access to information at their fingertips. One thing I'm super passionate about as a person, and it's part of the reason why I love the tech space so much, the digital space, is the fact that in my basic understanding of everything I see in my life, for instance, of people around me and of myself and how I interact with other people, is there is just, when they say information is power, you see that very clearly when it comes to the difference between when you have information and when you don't, especially because of technology enabling it. Case in point is that if you have no access to information and you're far removed, I grew up in the village myself, and I remember all I wanted those days is to have a book in my hand to read. I keep telling this story. It's probably something you'll pick up from other places I've spoken about it. I loved to read as a young girl. But our library in school those days had barely any books. It was like one of those public schools in the village that you had all of 7 tattered books scattered around the library. And I had already read them all. And I used to then pour through the pages of newspapers that my father would bring when he came now to visit us. Because we moved from the city, went to the village, because my father kept being moved, like work-wise. He was in the military. And finally, my mom was like, we're going to the village and we'll be based in one place so that the children have one stable school where they're learning. And he would now keep coming. And he'd bring us newspapers. I would read through everything, from page 1, Nuko had the obituaries you're going.
to the
I keep
spots.
reading
Yeah.
because it was interesting to find information, and I would feel so aware of matters to do with the world. I'd be curious about names of countries that I would find that I'd never heard of before, or people that I would wonder about how did they get into these positions where they are influencing these things that seem to be
Yeah.
continuous discussion points across different papers that I'd read, for example. And I remember thinking even then that I needed to have more information, access to information.
Yeah.
And for me, digital space, and why I love the digital space, is that it just bridged that gap. And it continues to bridge the gap for people who have, who don't have, and so on. All of us are the same. If you look at the fact that today, wherever you are as a person, if you have a device with you, you could be reading news from whichever media house or station that you have,
Yeah.
from wherever in the world.
Yeah.
You don't even need to have visited that country, and you have that information. You could be telling people about fresh news from Azerbaijan. Is that, then people are like, how do you know this? You're like, I read it this morning.
Yeah.
The gap it just bridges from having information, for me, is such a powerful thing. And so I continue to feel that that is a critical thing in empowering people, in making them even more free and explore their potentials even more. Because if you're in business or you have specific hobbies or areas of interest that you like to pursue, you then can be able to point to information that is about that thing and perfect it and be better, and be even more efficient, more effective in the trade you're in, or in the way that you engage in that issue.
So if we look ahead 3 to 5 years, and that's a long time, given that 3 years ago AI was not where it is today, and also other technological areas and spaces hadn't grown as much. But looking ahead 3 to 5 years from now, what emerging trends do you believe will define Africa's risk and security landscape? Because we've talked about how with the rise of the good is also the rise of the bad. And, so how is that space bound to happen in 3 to 5 years?
A really, really good question. I think 3 to 5 years, you'd be surprised 3 to 5 years is such a short time. I know how you're saying it's a long time. It's not. I mean, it is, yet it's not. Like the paradox of tech. If you're thinking from a tech perspective, in 3 years, so much could have changed. I remember still fondly those days when we had an Ericsson, what was it called? Ericsson 22. I can't remember the names. E22, what was the name?
I can remember the tune.
I had a flip phone, and it was I could not have been told that was like the epitome at the time. Like that was, you've got what? And you flip, and then and now I can't even imagine. I would never want to see how that phone looks like today. Like when I think about it, but why I'm saying that is because that's been a short, maybe that 20 years we're talking about now, 20, 25 years from that time of that phone and now. Yet it just feels like it was yesterday. I mean, I still remember where I was at in 2000. I mean, I was in uni, but I'm thinking it was just the other day. And yet so much has happened. Flip is back. It's back, and it's a good thing that it's back, because I think it was so posh to just like you flipped your phone. But anyway, before I digress too much. I think the question is a good one, and I love the question so much because of the fact that, to the point I was making earlier, I think understanding to some degree and embedding artificial intelligence understanding into anything that we do is helpful, but also just having insights about trends and things that are happening. And now we have a lot of, you don't have to computer scientists and people like that sitting within your teams. It's not what I'm saying, not at all. You can also leverage already available artificial intelligence run, let me say, apps or products or tools that are already out there in the market that can help you to have the intelligence on the fly, which already are available. If you think about, for example, if I was just to toot the horn of Meta here, for instance, we have Meta AI, we have large language models, Llama, we have many available AI-based tools that can help you be able to get insights really quickly on the fly on any device that you have. It's the case across a couple of other big tech companies, and there's many others who are developing solutions around artificial intelligence. I'm saying this because I'm thinking that having a proper understanding of your business, already you know that from a technical perspective, what expertise you bring, for example, in the space of security, in your case, you already know that. But understanding how this, like you're saying, the risks are evolving as technology continues to proliferate is a very important part of that. So in the area of security and risk, as you've asked, is I think is, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, it's to see how well do you understand those emerging risks. And these emerging risks, in my view, are becoming very more tech savvy in terms of leveraging technology. So previously, a burglar would come and break your windows or door or cut through your fence or whatever to get in and get information, to get in and get things that you have in your house. Today, that burglar could be sitting very far from you in a different country and is robbing you while you're in your house. Like that's the understanding the shift in the security to the question of shifts earlier. And I think it's a question of asking ourselves, how do I make sure that I am in my house? Yes, I have a burglar-proof house, but do I have a burglar-proof technology environment? And that is where I feel like a lot of people haven't prepared themselves. And some of those things are really basic. I'll just go into some of them. Simple thing like hackings. People get hacked on their phones. Whether it's on the apps that you're using, your banking information and places like that. A lot of times the hacking is happening because you as an individual haven't enabled basic security features for yourself. You have downloaded an app, you haven't entered any two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication of any form. So for instance, you're doing, and most of these have been provided within the apps that you're using. So you're using a banking app, but have not maybe enabled, say, biometrics to identify that this is Sheila getting on her phone to do an m-banking transaction. Or you are transacting, say, or chatting with strangers or people who are positing to be friends of yours, and you're giving them basic information like your PIN or basic information like verification codes that will be sent to you by the app provider to verify that it is really you who's signing into a device. And you're providing that information. So basic awareness, which is what I'm saying, embedding basic understanding of digital. I think having digital skills basically digital literacy at a basic level of how can I keep myself secure is critical in getting ahead of the risks that could come to you. So that could cut back a lot of risks. But over and above that, for entities now, organizations themselves, I think there is a big part where they themselves can invest more in how do we make sure that the offerings that we have are allowing for people to be safe. And having an awareness in your case, because you're like in the space of security, having an awareness in how are these risks emerging today in terms of if you're serving a customer, what are the kinds of challenges that you'll be seeing? In the security space, my view right now is that the area of how artificial intelligence is being used to fool people and to make it look content, people, impersonations look as real as possible is a big area. We have tons of deep fake videos that we see people producing today that carry the voice. There could be someone having an image of me sitting, taking an interview similar to this in a place I've never been myself. It has this face of mine with my voice because somebody has been able to create that, in a room somewhere, and it could be anyone in the world. So deep fakes are a big thing. Images that are being AI generated is a big thing where people are, spoofing people based on that, and people are not paying attention because sometimes you find that you could actually look at that video and be able to tell, this is not it. And then I think the bigger disconnect for me, I feel, is people putting the guard down of, I'd say, the understanding they have of their security space in the physical world, like offline world, and not aligning that with the online space. And I'll give you an example. You find that the same way we tell our children when they're young, don't talk to strangers, don't tell people information about yourself. If they ask you about who your mother is, how old your mother is, where does she work, don't tell them things like that. We say those things in the offline space to put security barriers in place. But we find when it comes to the online world, we don't mirror those actions there. And I feel like that is a big disconnect. We need to have that also there so that you find that if it is a child, because a lot of parents worry about their children being online and so on, it is to ask that child, if somebody then is approaching you with a friend request, you have never heard this name, you don't know this person, should you just accept a friend request like that? Basic things like that. It is the same guidance you'd give them of do not talk to a stranger. So why are you then accepting a friend request? This person is asking to be your friend online yes, it's a Roblox game or it's, I don't know, a game I play online. But who is this person? Why aren't you being more cautious about how you just let in anyone into your space, your online space? And so it's some guardrails in my view when it comes to security and risk are about actually just applying some of the things that you would in a physical space or offline space into online spaces.
Yeah.
But now also educating yourself around what are these things that you need to do in the online space that enable you to have a more secure environment for yourself. But that requires you to be woke to basic things like, and now information is power, like I said, you could, find that information. What are the basics? Have I set a strong password, for example? Have I set up a strong password for my email? Am I logging on to different apps on my phone and I'm doing the same on my computer and I'm leaving that computer here in an open space with very simple password as a thing that anyone can guess and like, it will be Sheila's birthday, and let me try her birthday, and it goes through, things like that. So you have to think about how am I also, taking care of myself in that space. So when it comes to security and risk, and I'm saying it from a very like maybe basic way, but I feel like if we start with our own self-enforcement or self-checking on how we are interacting with the tech space, it shouldn't be a scary space to be. You shouldn't face those kinds of challenges. But also now it is on a larger scale, which is actually a big part of the work we do, is how do we then empower governments to understand how to scale digital literacy awareness across the public? How do we make sure government themselves, even as they're writing laws, they're writing them with the understanding of what would work, so that we're not also legislating from a place of fear, where we come and say, hey, this thing is a bad thing, people are losing money, there's fraud and scams, therefore we will write a law that prohibits people from going online, and then you're like, have you realized that in prohibiting people now, they also cannot find access to educational tools that they were using maybe for revision so there is that thing of how do we make sure we strike the right balance in going across. But also then how can organizations, so the question you were asking earlier about social responsibility, think about the services and products that they offer, and saying that if we're using technology in any form or shape, how do we make sure that we are also, packaging a lot of awareness and resources for the users of our products or services to be able to interact with our product or service in a safe manner. So there is a self-regulation of that nature that ought to happen also with entities that are offering those services online. And then taking responsibility when there's a breach. So for instance, if it is the banking sector and someone has lost money, and they were supposed to have sent you maybe an over-the-air password to confirm you're the one transacting and they didn't send that, to then have to make amends and say, okay, you lost money, it was on us, we'll refund you. Those kinds of things. So there has to be some level of deliberateness in building that trust and safety at an individual level, but also at the level of government and also at the level of private sector who are offering services and products.
What keeps you optimistic about the future in Africa for businesses and the governance of the different countries?
That is a good one. The future of Africa is a big, wide, broad subject. But let me say this, that I think if I was to say one word, I would say empowerment.
Yeah.
And I'm saying empowerment from the perspective of thinking from a technology space. I told you I've only been, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, I've only worked in the digital space. The technology is at the heart of everything I do, and I love tech. I love digital space because it offers a lot of dynamism. It's not like your regular, every day is different because there's just so much changing within that space. But also just seeing the power of technology to just improve by leaps and bounds the scale with which anything can be done. And, just the limitations of a human being is that you'll get tired, you can only do this much work, you only have this many hours in the day, you still have to have other areas to lean into, maybe your family and so on. But with technology, it's like that can continue to happen as though, so I love that about technology. Technology scales for you reach, it scales for you efficiency, effectiveness. It can just do so much more for you. And I love, why I use the word empowerment is because I feel like Africa is in such a good space to unlock massive potential that Africa has. Africa is a very, very, very blessed, or let me say heavily endowed in terms of resources and also in terms of the population. We have a huge population of people, 1.4 billion and growing. But more importantly, the bulk of that population is young people. That is, like, we don't have that anywhere else in the world. That just, first of all, just makes us really unique as a continent. So you're talking over, I think the numbers are staggering, like is it 50% or 50 to 70% is youth.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Like young people below the age of 35, primarily majority of the people you're interacting with in Africa are young people. And what that means is that these young people, when it comes to the digital space, usually are digital natives. They are just with technology from the start because they were born when technology already had, gone everywhere. Like they were born when the phone was already here. We had mobile phones. A lot of them, you tell them stories of a landline. They're like, how ati kring kring like this is, what stories are those? They don't understand that.
Yeah.
And they just found stuff. They came, in fact, many of them said with Cocomelon or whatever.
Yeah.
They knew, and they even at that small age before they start talking, they know how to. I don't recommend it, but I'm just saying kids who are now in that age group that we're calling youth already understand technology very well.
Yeah.
And I feel that just creating the right environment for them to really unlock the potential that this continent could have is a really key thing. And I feel like technology is able to do that. The empowering of people, which is why I use the word empowerment, and empowering through all of the ways and efforts. Like it needs all of the different stakeholders, government, civil society, media, academia, industry in terms of the private sector and others to lean into that supporting that unlocking of that opportunity. How can they do that? Make sure that you have the right laws. So all of these different players taking up their different parts. The right laws and policies that unlock opportunities for more investment to create ecosystems that can allow for innovation, can allow for the young people to figure out their own. They're not waiting to be told, be a lawyer, be a doctor.
Yeah.
There are many who are coming up with like amazing innovations. And I think if they have the right access to connectivity, to affordable devices, to capital, to support them and so on and so forth. That's what I'm saying. It takes everyone in the community to be able to lean in and support that. We can really unlock a huge, massive potential that we already sits with us because we have a youthful population, so that we don't have a situation where everyone is just waiting to leave the continent.
Yeah.
We can have people wanting to do stuff within the continent because we've empowered them using access to technology, and that they're able to then find their own ways to figure out the challenges that we have within the continent and coming up with solutions for them that are local, that we can resonate with and that we can do even more with. And I think if we do that, I see a lot of, let me say, a bright future for all of us, because then even for us who are older, who are way out of the youth bracket, could benefit from just having a thriving ecosystem that is predominantly young, being able to latch and leverage technology to spur the continent even further.
Amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you so very much for coming.
You're welcome.
And,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, karibu.
Asante.
Tena na tena. And this has been an educational masterclass on policy.
I hope so.
Yeah, so asante sana.
You're welcome.
All
Thank
right.
you so much for having me.